So next we have Corazon Fabros, who's a well-known peace activist and has dedicated much of her life to the work of nuclear disarmament, to social justice, particularly focused in the Philippines, but is a co-chair or co-president of the International Peace Bureau, as well as she convenes many other peace initiatives and peace groups and has led the campaign for peace for many decades. So Corazon, over to you.
Thank you, Mika, and thank you for the generous introduction. And we would also like to thank the organizers for giving us the opportunity to give our thoughts on the current issue that we are facing today. Let me begin by saying that the U.S. bases are back in the Philippines. The reestablishment of foreign military bases in the Philippines has puzzled many who still are a very clear image of the hasty U.S. Exit from the Philippines in its massive military bases back in 1991 and 1992. And to think that the Philippines have now a provision against foreign military bases and troops and nuclear weapons in its constitution. Add to that, the Philippines now have many military defense agreements, not only with the United States, but also with several countries like Japan, France, Australia, UK, and under negotiations are with Canada, New Zealand, Singapore, and others that we don't know at this moment. Let me then go direct to the point. The Philippines is being groomed as the next focal point in the U.S. design. The United States design to encircle China in the Pacific and is paving the way for greater involvement of NATO allies in the region. Recently, in July 8, the Philippines and Japan, both U.S. allies, signed a reciprocal access agreement, or what I'd call RAA. This will provide for both countries' military forces to come to each other's territory for war exercise and other related purposes. It also provides, I think this is significant, it provides for Japan to sell military equipment to the Philippines to modernize its armed forces. This RAA is another link in the chain of security and defense agreements the Philippines has entered into. Just 2 months before the Japan-Philippines RAA was the US-led and baptized Squad, a regional security and defense bloc to counter China's aggressiveness in the Asia-Pacific region. The Squad is composed of the US, Japan, Australia, and the Philippines. Just a month before the birth of Squad was the US-Japan-Philippines Summit in Washington, D.C., that led to the formation of a trilateral security cooperation of the three countries. Thus, because of these, all these are provided thus in only 3 months from April. The Philippines has signed 3 strategic agreements to prepare and rehearse for war. All these are prodded by the US. Other than these, the Philippines has other defense and security pacts with the US and Australia. These are the Philippines-Australia Status of Forces Agreement back in 2007, the Philippines-Australia Comprehensive Security Partnership signed last year, the US-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty, an old agreement that is still being used today, back in 1951, the US-Philippine Visiting Forces Agreement, or VFA, signed in 1999, and the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, signed in 2014, and affirmed for indefinite extension last February. Also being worked out since 2022 is the US-Australia-Philippines Security Triad. But though without any formal agreements yet, there has been an increasing security and defense cooperation of the three countries, as in joint naval patrols in the South China Sea, or what we'd prefer to call West Philippine Sea. Of all these agreements, the Philippines entered into the U.S.-Philippine Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or what I'd call EDCA for short, and the increasing joint military exercises being held in the country annually, whether big or small, that are militarizing the whole archipelago and urging the Filipinos to be ready for war against U.S. identified enemy, China. The heightened tension in the South China Sea began last year when 4 more Philippine military facilities or camps were added to the list of agreed locations, or EDCA sites for basing of U.S. military forces, troops, weapons, and war equipment. Of the latest added EDCA sites, 3 are closest to Taiwan and 1 is within the South China Sea or the West Philippine Sea. These evoke, of course, strong reactions from China. There are now 9 EDCA sites, or technically U.S. military bases in the Philippines, excluding the supposedly closed Subic Naval Base in Zambales and Clark Air Base in Pampanga, which are being actively used by U.S. military forces, especially during war games, war exercises in the Philippines. Not among the listed EDCA sites is Camp Navarro in Zamboanga City, where 100 soldiers of the U.S. Special Forces Command are stationed on rotational basis. These U.S. military bases and the increasing joint military exercises, especially the yearly Balikatan exercises, the biggest that happens in the Philippines, which last year saw the participation as observers of 14 nations and the participation of US, France, Australia, and the host country, Philippines, that are all preparations for war against US enemies. Before Balikatan 2024, last April, the US Pacific Command deployed the mid-range capability missile system somewhere in northern Luzon, in one of the islands. Despite the end of the war exercise, the US Army has not said how long the MRC missile system will be in the Philippines. And that's very interesting and alarming as well. This is the first ever deployment of US Army's MRC, seen by many as a calculated strategic move by the US to strengthen its footprint and assert its influence in the Indo-Pacific region. Russia's ambassador to the US, Anatoly Antonov, lambasted this as another step by Washington towards escalating military confrontation in the Asia-Pacific region. Such action by the US is another powerful blow to the strategic stability, the ambassador added. Of course, China's foreign ministry firmly opposed the deployment of the MRC system and urged the US to earnestly respect the security concerns of other countries. China's defense ministry called it a dangerous move that will seriously threaten the security of regional countries and undermine regional peace and security. The MRC missile system can fire the Tomahawk land attack missile, a maneuverable cruise missile with a range of 1,600 kilometers or 1,000 miles, according to the Center of Strategic and International Studies. Such range can reach China's installations and vessels in the South China Sea, in southern China mainland, and in the Taiwan Strait. These are just among the highlights of the increasing militarization of the US, of the Philippines, and the West Philippine Sea, or the South China Sea. The US has since 2010 identified China as its de facto enemy. But China is not the enemy of the Philippines, but we are being dragged by the US into this conflict with China. We see US as the real and principal warmonger and war maker since the end of World War II. It is the only country that has 800 plus military bases worldwide, and most of these are in Asia Pacific or the Indo-Pacific region. Last month, in July 30, Blinken and Austin were in the Philippines for the first ever 2+2 ministerial dialogue with their Philippine counterpart. They affirmed their shared vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific region and discussed ways to deepen coordination on shared challenges, including in the South China Sea, and advance bilateral economic agenda. They also met with the Philippine president and explored additional ways to capitalize on the unprecedented momentum in the US-Philippines alliance. The US officials also came with with $500 million military aid for the Philippines. That's the icing in the cake, I think. By all indications, the Philippines is not only being set up as one of the launch pads for US war designs. Our country is being prodded by the US to be the starter or the trigger for its war with China. I'm sorry to give you a grim picture of our situation in the Philippines. We live in an extremely dangerous times with challenges and, of course, to which we need to face in different levels. We need to create movements, people's movements, locally, regionally, and internationally, of course, to create a critical mass that aspires for peace, unity, solidarity, justice, and upholding the concept of common security, which the International Peace Bureau advocates these days. In terms of the ASEAN, the civil society movements get together every year through the ASEAN People's Forum or the ASEAN Civil Society Conference. This year, the APF will be held in Timor-Leste on September 19 to 21. Important issues such as peace, disarmament, and denuclearization, putting at the forefront the need for diplomacy, dialogue, solidarity, and the reduction of military spending to fund human needs. Let us unite against war and for peace. Let us resist US war schemes and US dragging the whole Asia-Pacific region into its continuing militarization in many parts of the world. Friends, we have witnessed the power of united peoples over the years. Peace and justice do not come in a silver platter, of course. Our continuing resistance as united peoples have given us victories, whether big or small. They are steps, an important steps towards achieving peace, nuclearization, and disarmament of our region. The people's resistance that continues to grow in many parts of Asia and the Pacific, in Okinawa as well as in base communities in Japan, in Jeju, Guam, in the Marianas, Australia, Aotearoa, New Zealand, the Philippines, including at the heartland of the empire, and NATO, our inspiration that continues to make us more powerful. Thank you, and Let us all stay strong and committed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Corazon. How you began, although it's very sobering, I think this is a moment in history where we do need to have a very clear picture of what we're up against. And actually at Tricontinental earlier this year, we published a study called Hyper-Imperialism, a Dangerous and Decadent New Stage, where part of our intervention was that us as peace-loving people, as people involved in the peace activist movement, need to still hope, still struggle, but also have a clear sense of what we're up against. And one of those things was the fact that the US-led military bloc, the US basically garnering its forces in the global north, has at least 75%, almost 75% of military spending. And this exists in a moment in time where we could eradicate hunger, we could eradicate a lot of basic illnesses and diseases, but people still go to bed with empty stomachs whilst we have this disproportionate spending that's going towards military spending. So really appreciate what you shared.